Aboard the Asteria, Liara Kest was supposed to be the first to descend the ramp to the ambassadors. Protocol demanded it, so did her title, and that was how she was used to entering any room. Straight-backed, calm, leaving no one in doubt who spoke here for an entire house. She managed one step. After that, the armor locked her legs in place. Liara stopped, keeping an almost flawless posture, but she could no longer move forward or kneel in greeting, or remove the heavy suit on her own. Her neck tensed beneath the high collar. Her gaze, with its vertical pupils, darted toward the delegations, then to the officers who instantly surrounded the ramp. Her four-fingered hands clenched into fists. The specialists began speaking in low voices. One asked her not to move. Another ordered the passage cleared. A third stared at the locked plates as though hoping they might change their minds on their own. No one dared touch the princess, but no one could explain why the armor had stopped obeying her. Liara ordered them to stand back. The command came out sharp and authoritative. It was just that she did not move from the spot, and every ambassador saw it. Her refusal to listen to the specialists had not restored her control, but it only left her standing before everyone as a motionless figure in expensive armor that now looked more like a cage. Then a man in a work jacket came out of the side passage. No insignia, no guards, no slightest desire to bow. An ordinary mechanic from the repair hangar, Ilya stopped at the edge of the ramp and calmly said he could get her out of the passage. Liara turned her head as far as the armor allowed. "You are forbidden to come any closer." "Then you'll remain here," Ilya replied. Not rudely. He was simply stating what everyone could already see. There was no fear of her title in his voice, and no attempt to ingratiate himself. Ilya was looking neither at the jeweled plates nor at her house's crest. He was watching the way the armor held her, as though the failure were not accidental. Liara remained silent for several more seconds. The ambassadors waited behind her. Before her stood a man she had not wanted near even her equipment, but the choice left no dignified outcome. Let him support her in front of everyone, or keep standing, while the ceremony turned into a public admission of helplessness. At last, she gave the slightest nod. Ilya approached, took her by the elbow, and led her off the ramp. The ambassadors stepped aside. Now they were looking not only at the frozen princess, but also at the man she had allowed to hold her upright. Ilya did not pull her any farther. He asked Liara to shift her weight onto her good leg and carefully touch the fastening at her chest. While the armor was not bearing her weight, the plate gave way. Not easily, but evenly, without resistance. Ilya let go of her, asked her to put her weight on both legs again, and repeated the test. The fastening snapped shut instantly. Liara jerked her shoulder, and this time the pain showed on her face before she could hide it. Ilya withdrew his hand. "Again," he said, "I am not obliged to serve as your test subject." "No, but the armor is behaving differently now, when it bears no load and when it bears your weight." He did not explain further. For an ordinary malfunction, the difference was far too convenient. It was as though the fastening had been waiting for the person it was meant to protect to be inside. Ilya did not yet know exactly what made it tighten, and he could not call it an assassination attempt. He knew only that testing it without someone inside proved nothing. The specialists were already preparing an external brace. It was supposed to hold the damaged section in place until the ceremony ended, so Liara could at least stand before the ambassadors. One of them raised it to her neck. Liara instinctively drew back her left shoulder and held her breath. Ilya noticed before they secured the brace. "Do not fasten it. You are not authorized to interfere," the senior specialist said. Ilya asked Liara to turn her torso slightly. She turned her head with the movement, and the edge of the brace touched her neck. Her face went pale at once. She stepped back as far as the armor allowed and pressed her chin to her shoulder. Ilya was the first to move away. "If they secure it like that, you will be able to remain standing, but you may not be able to turn your head." "Enough." Liara looked down at him, although by now he was the only person who had not offered her a solution that could make things worse. "Kneel, mechanic, and do not touch me without an order." Ilya calmly set his tools on the edge of the ramp. "I will not kneel. I will not touch you without your permission." He lowered his hands and took a step back. Liara immediately tried to walk out of the passage on her own. Just one step. Her weight shifted onto the jammed plate. The fastening pinned her arm against her chest. And then, the armor constricted around her ribs. Her breath stopped. Liara doubled over, but that only tightened the grip. The specialists froze. No one dared approach. Ilya remained where he was. "Do not move," he said in the same even voice. "It will only get worse." Liara could hear him, but her order to remove the mechanic had now taken from her the one person who had already seen the pattern. There was less and less time before she needed to draw another breath, and allowing him back would mean admitting in front of everyone that her authority had not restored control, but had only tightened the trap. In the repair bay, Liara ordered everyone except Ilya to move away from her. It was not trust yet. She simply knew all too well now the price of an order given to preserve her dignity. Ilya returned to the tool he had left behind and released the accessible lock on the breastplate. When the edge of the plate lifted, he did not continue. A thin, silver thread gleamed beneath the inner strip. "Look here." Liara tilted her head. The thread had been cleanly cut, and a short foreign stitch lay over the original seam. Too neat to draw attention, and too uneven to belong to the original work. "This section was opened," Ilya said, then closed again. "By whom? The stitch doesn't tell us that. The lining could have been replaced in a hurry. The court workshop could have made a mistake. We need to check who had access and when." Liara looked at him for a long time. Outside the door, specialists, officers, and ambassadors waited for her to appear before them in this armor. "First you said the danger was more serious than an ordinary malfunction. Now you show me a thread and cannot even name the culprit. Why should I believe your accusation?" Ilya did not look away. "You shouldn't. I'm not accusing anyone. But someone deliberately opened this section. I don't know why yet." He was silent for a moment, then added, without his earlier certainty, "And I was wrong. I decided I had found the only threat when I saw the jammed lock. If there is something else here, my mistake will be enough to put you in danger again." Liara had expected an excuse, an appeal to experience, a demand that she stay out of the way. Instead, the man had named the reason himself why letting him near her was dangerous. She turned to the senior specialist and ordered the ceremony stopped. Then she closed the door on her retinue and remained facing Ilya. "Continue the inspection, only with me present. Before you touch anything, explain what you intend to do. I can stop you at any moment." Ilya gave a brief nod and waited until Liara herself allowed him to lift the plate. Ilya lifted the plate only as far as she had allowed and stopped. "The left fastener must not be put back in place. If we close it now and wait for the court workshop, the pressure will increase. Standard procedure does not protect you here. It leaves you trapped inside the armor with no way to move." Liara looked at the door. The very people responsible for enforcing that procedure were waiting on the other side. That morning, canceling it would have meant admitting that the princess placed an hanger mechanic's word above the rules of her own court. Now even a full breath came with noticeable effort. She opened the internal channel and called for the diplomatic secretary. When he entered, Liara did not allow him to come near the armor. "Record this. I have canceled the wait for the court specialists. The left fastener remains open. I accept responsibility for deviating from protocol." The secretary entered the order in the access log and stated the time. Liara ordered him to repeat the entry aloud, listened to the end, and pressed her personal seal to it. Then she ordered the packet prepared for the ambassadors to be brought in. Inside was the register of detentions that made it impossible to simply postpone her appearance before the delegations until another day. The entry from the 12th day recorded detention number 47, without any charge being presented. 2 days later, number 51 appeared, with an order forbidding anyone from telling the prisoner's family where he was being held. Both orders bore the name of the chief of security. More numbers, dates, and extensions followed, each entered on his orders and outside the court's authority. Until that moment, the register had remained the princess's document. If she failed to reach the ambassadors, the court could declare the entries a draft, seize the packet, and dispute every line. Liara dated the last page and pressed her personal seal against it. "Create a certified copy. Deliver the original to the senior ambassador in person. The copy goes to the civil registrar through the diplomatic channel." "Under what condition should the transfer begin?" the secretary asked. "If I am isolated, cut off from communications, or someone tries to take me away from here without you present. At the same time, request from the registrar an independent log of everyone who has had access to my armor." The secretary repeated the route, the conditions, and the recipients. Then he sealed the copy with his own neutral seal. Ilya did not interfere throughout. He resumed his inspection only after Liara gave him a brief nod of permission. She had not proved that the malfunction was connected to the register, but now the princess's disappearance could not destroy the records without a trace. It would itself trigger their transfer and an independent review. The armor jerked again, without warning. The chest plates came together, and Liara's back struck the wall. The secretary's junior assistant was beside her, still barely more than a boy, with a folder of documents clutched to his chest. He did not have time to move away. The closing panels had already caught his shoulder and pinned him against the edge of the partition. "Everyone back," Liara ordered. But the order came too late. Ilya lunged forward. He did not reach for the emergency lever or try to tear the plate off Liara. First, he shoved the assistant out of the danger zone, turning him by the shoulder, and then he thrust his own hands between the panels. Metal closed over his hands. Ilya sucked in a sharp breath. His fingers went white, his knuckles immediately slick with blood, but he did not pull back. Now the plates were pressing against him, keeping Liara inside the trap. Beyond the protective partition was an emergency release. One step, and he could press it himself. "Ilya, step away," Liara said. "Then the panels will close. Release the armor." He looked at her, then at the lever deeper inside the bay. Pain flickered across his face, but not doubt. Once, at a cargo station, he had also been ordered to act immediately. They had started a jammed winch before checking it, and the snapped cable had crushed his partner's hand. After that, Ilya stopped believing the words, "just a malfunction," especially when someone demanded that the job be done at any cost. But now he did not confuse caution with inaction. "I can reach the release," he said, "but then the decision will be mine. If you want to press it yourself, I'll give you the lever." Liara looked at the emergency mechanism. She understood what would happen once it was activated. The armor would open, and with it would go the last barrier between her helpless body and everyone still in the bay. Even now, behind a closed door, she could not know who was listening or who would enter first. "Are you waiting for my order?" "No, for your choice." Holding the panel with one hand, Ilya tore the lever free of its mounting with the other and placed it in Liara's palm. He did not close her fingers around it, guide her hand, or tell her when to pull. He simply kept holding the metal while his own hands trembled from the strain. Liara closed her eyes for the space of one breath. Then she pulled the lever herself. The armor sprang open with a sharp click. The pressure eased, and air returned to her lungs. But she was not completely free. The panels had opened only far enough for Liara to breathe and raise her arms. Ilya was still holding them apart from the outside. But human strength was no longer enough. "The left one," he managed. "Hold the left panel. Pull it toward you." Liara could push him away, let the armor close again, or, for the first time, take some of its weight herself. She braced her palm against the edge of the panel and held it. The pressure did not disappear, but Ilya was no longer the only one keeping the trap from closing. Liara could breathe again. She had chosen the moment herself, and she was holding the way open for the next move. Ilya held the panel with one hand and used the other to reach the thin contact beside the exposed crosspiece. He shifted it only slightly, just enough to stop the plate from pulling inward. The pressure on Liara's chest eased. She drew a deeper breath. The pain beneath her ribs receded, and the panel no longer tried to wrench itself from her palm. Ilya was able to remove one hand. At that same instant, the light on the collar went out. The secretary checked the channel and jerked his head up. "Security has lost your beacon." Liara touched the inner panel. Where her status had been displayed, there was now only a blank indicator. Along with the beacon, the emergency call and confirmation of her location had vanished. Those outside the door could no longer tell whether she was on her feet or even alive. Ilya returned the contact to its original position. The panel immediately shuddered. Liara had not finished drawing breath when the armor tightened around her chest again. He immediately shifted the contact back, and the pressure eased as the signal disappeared again. Now the choice was clear without any explanation. The beacon and the constriction returned together. Ilya still could not remove one while leaving the other in place. Liara looked at the extinguished light. Before, her safety had meant that security knew about every movement she made. Now it meant allowing the armor to take her air again. "Leave it in manual mode," she ordered. "Tell security by voice. There will be no automatic signal." The secretary immediately repeated the message over the external channel. Liara did not let go of the closure. "Ilya, stay by the armor. Do not let anyone else near it. Secretary, stay here and record everything he does. I retain the right to stop any of it." This was no longer another permission to continue the inspection. She had consciously chosen a state in which she could breathe, while security would no longer receive a signal from her beacon. As long as the dangerous section remained inside her, her safety depended not on the security system, but on the fact that the man from the hangar would stay beside her and keep the system in manual mode. On the section already inspected, Ilya noticed another mark. He asked Liara to raise her arm, waited for permission, and carefully moved the fabric aside. Beneath it, a small seal from the night shift emerged. The secretary came close enough to see it with his own eyes. He recorded the seal's exact position and appearance, allowing no one to shift the armor until the record had been certified. "The seal confirms access by the night shift, not a name," Ilya said. "Without the log, any accusation will remain a guess." The secretary sent the civil registrar a request for the signed access log covering the night window. He attached his record and Liara's confirmation to the request, then saved the transmission receipt from the diplomatic channel. The registrar had not yet replied when the head of security appeared on the external channel. He spoke with impeccable courtesy, as though he were not challenging Liara's order, but protecting her from the consequences of her own decision. The princess's beacon had been extinguished. The armor was operating in an abnormal manual mode. An unknown trace remained on the open section, and the man working beside it did not belong to the court workshop. The chief did not accuse Ilya. Until the log arrived, he had no need to. The absence of an identified culprit made it possible to regard everyone in the bay as a potential threat, while the loss of the beacon allowed him to claim that the standard protection for the princess was no longer in effect. To this, he added the unknown substance left behind after the malfunction, and declared the room a possible contamination zone. Until the people had been checked, they were to be separated, the mechanic isolated for his own safety, and access to Liara returned to the regular specialists. That turned the manual mode that allowed her to breathe into grounds, for taking away the only person capable of keeping it in place. Restoring the beacon meant starting the compression again. Keeping things as they were would give the guards a formally impeccable reason to enter. Liara ordered the posts to remain by the door. "The posts have already been recalled," the chief reported, "to rule out the influence of a possible intruder." The locks opened, and people in sealed uniforms came inside. 2 headed toward the secretary, and 2 more toward Ilya. One of them ordered the mechanic to move away from the princess immediately. "A hazardous area cannot be left without manual control," Ilya said. "Your actions will be reviewed after isolation." The guard stepped between him and Liara. The arrangement that, only moments ago, was meant to keep strangers away from her, was now removing the only person capable of keeping the armor safe. One of the guards grabbed the mechanic by the shoulder and led him beyond the protective partition. The door closed, cutting Ilya off from the bay. The secretary, left inside, saw a new line on the panel beside the manual mode indicator and read it aloud. "Remote forced lock." "Do not start that," Ilya said from outside. "Start what?" the secretary asked. "On the damaged fastener, I saw the same sign of a protective mode. It activated where a release should have engaged. It is an external command. The panel does not show who sent it." One of the guards jerked Ilya backward, but he did not resist. He only kept watching the inner panel. "Record the command before it executes," he said. "Otherwise, afterward, all we will have left is our word." The secretary was already holding the log open. He repeated the command name aloud, along with the state of the manual mode and the time shown on the panel. Then he added a note stating that the instruction had come from outside and had not yet been executed. "I confirm the record with my personal seal," he said. "A separate certified copy is being preserved now." He pressed the seal to the page and kept the copy as an independent witness, without handing it to either the guards or the court specialists. Only then did the locks inside the bay engage. The left panel jerked first. Liara managed to brace it with her palm, but the second plate was already moving toward it. The armor closed around her chest with the same movement Ilya had seen before. Only now the manual contact was no longer holding it back. Air caught in Liara's throat. She tried to breathe and could not draw a full breath. "The command is executing," the secretary said, already recording it in the copy. "Execution time. Now." Ilya struck the partition with his palm. "Open the passage. The mechanic is being detained until the inspection is complete," the chief of security replied over the external channel. Liara heard that voice and dug her fingers into the edge of the panel. Once, they had locked her in a secure room, and her sister had been killed outside the door while the guards carried out the order not to open it. Since then, a closed door had never meant safety to her. "Do not seal the hangar," she forced out. "Open the passage. Release Ilya immediately." The guards did not move. "That is a princess's order," Liara said, and her next attempt to breathe ended in a rasp. "Open it." The secretary relayed the order over the internal channel, and cited it as grounds for emergency access. The partition slid aside. Ilya returned without a bow or a wasted word, and immediately dropped beside the tightening panel. "Do not touch the left one," he told Liara. "Hold it. I am looking for whatever is triggering the pressure." The armor kept constricting, while the recorded command was already in the hands of an independent witness. Now they only had to stop the trap before it closed completely. Liara did not let go of the panel. Her fingers slipped along the edge, the metal already cutting into her palm, while the armor pulled the left plate farther inward with every passing second. "Ilya, faster! Do not let go, and do not press on the right side." He slipped his hand into the narrow gap and felt for the same contact that held the manual mode in place. His fingers were working almost blind now. Liara could only see his arm tense and blood from his split knuckles well up on his skin again. "I am going to remove the bridge. The pressure may shift onto you. Do it. If it gets worse, tell me at once." She wanted to snap back, but at that moment the panel jerked. Liara barely held on to it. Ilya gritted his teeth, caught hold of the contact again, and wrenched it toward him. The armor gave a dry click. The pressure stopped so suddenly that Liara nearly lost her balance. Ilya caught her by the shoulder, but withdrew his hand as soon as she was steady on her own. For several seconds, no one spoke. Liara leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Ilya sat on the floor before the open armor, cradling his injured hand against his chest. "You stopped it," the secretary said. "We stopped it," Ilya corrected him. "If she had let go of the panel, I could not have done anything." A small dark fragment fell from an inner fold. It struck the floor and rolled toward the secretary's boot. "Do not touch it," Liara and Ilya said at the same time. The secretary stopped, but before picking up the object, he leaned over the open armor and recorded the exact spot in the concealed fold where the fragment had fallen from. He documented the position of the components, the direction of the scratches on the metal, and the marks around the empty space. The mount remained untouched, so the relative positions would not change. Only then did the secretary take out a sealed evidence bag and pick up the fragment with forceps. The piece had been wedged inside the mount, so that, without any weight on it, it did not interfere with the inspection. But under Liara's weight, it triggered the lethal constriction. Fresh signs of hand-fitting remained along its edges. The fragment had been installed deliberately, so an inspection of the empty armor would not detect it. A random failure could no longer explain it, but the person who had done it and the motive behind it remained unknown. At that same moment, the registrar's reply came in. During the relevant window that night, the chief of security had authorized access to the armor. When the chief of security appeared in the open passage, the secretary ordered him not to draw the ceremonial blade himself. He accepted the sheathed weapon, secured it on the table, and drew the blade himself just far enough to inspect the edge. There was a fresh chip in it. The secretary documented it, then brought the fragment close with the forceps. The uneven break matched, as did the rare engraving that ran through it. He separately documented the comparison, the signed log, and Ilya's caveat. The blade could have been taken without its owner's knowledge, and the fragment could have been planted. The connection was now verifiable and dangerous, but it was not yet a verdict. Ilya got to his feet when security personnel entered the bay. One of them sealed his tool chest. Another ran his pass through the terminal. The light went out. "Step away from the heiress's equipment and leave the sector," the hangar chief ordered. "Your access to the hangar is revoked. As of this moment, you no longer work here." Ilya looked at the sealed chest, then at Liara. He did not say her name or ask for protection. "Understood," he said. Without a word, he walked out of the repair bay through the passage, which was already open. The chief of security waited until Ilya was out, then reached for the sealed packet. "Destroy the fragment, immediately. Seize the records from the bay." The secretary pressed the packet to his chest and refused to comply. The chief could still claim that his blade had been taken without his knowledge, that the log had been forged, and that the fragment had been planted. His demand did not yet disprove any of those possibilities. It only made the secretary hold the evidence more tightly. Then the chief spoke the same command into the channel, its certified copy already lying in the log. "Remote forced lockdown. Execute." The panel accepted the order. Liara's open armor shuddered, and the locks clicked, but the panels did not move. Without the removed fragment, the command could no longer trigger the lethal constriction. The chief realized it at the same moment as everyone else. Two of his people moved toward the secretary. The third headed for the door and began closing the exit from the bay. "Isolate the witnesses," the chief ordered. "Stop the transfer of the materials." The secretary opened the log, repeated aloud the command that had just been given, and recorded the time it was executed. Then he pressed his personal seal to the entry and opened the diplomatic channel that had already been designated. "The repeated command has been recorded. I am transmitting it together with the certified copy of the first command, the signed Night Access Log, and Liara's registry. I request immediate witness protection." He confirmed the transmission before the chief's people could seize the log. The independent envoys now had the complete sequence. The chief had demanded the destruction of evidence connected to his blade, had repeated the command he had already used to try to kill Liara, and, when the disabled trap failed to activate, sent his men after the witnesses. The registry explained the chief's original calculation. Liara was supposed to die before she could personally certify the document and secure its transmission to the envoys. Then the secret detentions carried out on his orders could be concealed, and he could remain in power. But Liara had managed to affix her seal and designate independent recipients, so even her death could no longer stop the registry. The chief was trying to destroy the evidence because his original plan had failed. From the corridor, Ilya saw a guard closing the passage doors, and managed to wedge his injured shoulder between them. The secretary backed toward him. One of the chief's men struck Ilya's battered hand. He staggered, but did not let the exit close. The chief snatched the ceremonial blade from the table and lunged at the secretary. Liara was still standing in her open armor. When the chief came within reach, she blocked his strike, caught his wrist, and knocked the blade to the floor. That moment was enough. The independent envoy's guards responded to the secretary's emergency request. They entered through the passage Ilya was holding open and saw the chief's men attacking the witnesses. The transmitted package already contained both commands and the rest of the evidence. The chief and his subordinates were detained. Later, Liara did not reinstate Ilya's revoked clearance. That hangar answered to the system that had nearly killed her. Instead, she publicly established an independent workshop for the workers who had lost their jobs after the truth came out, and offered Ilya a position there. "On one condition," he said. "If one of your decisions puts lives at risk, I can stop the work, even if you order me to continue." Liara held out a new work badge to him. "On one equal condition. If you're the one who's wrong, I'll stop you." Ilya accepted the badge. Now the right to say no protected them both, and Liara's title no longer made her an exception.